One of the biggest stories that's going through the news today is the fact that our president is personally going down to the border and forcefully ripping children away from their mothers and separating families. Yes, that's an exaggeration, but if you were to read the headlines and take them at verbatim, that would be what you believe is happening down there. There's a lot of myth and there's a lot of fact to go along with the story that's going down there, and there's a lot here to unpack. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and let you know what I see and what's actually going on down there and some of the things that are being done to fix it. The United States border with Mexico is full of checkpoints where you can stop, check in, and say, hey, I'm coming into the country or I'm leaving the country temporarily, and let the authorities from both countries know what it is that you plan to do. That's how a border works, and it's an effective tool in order to limit and control immigration. But there are only a certain number of these checkpoints, and the concern is coming from what happens between the checkpoints. Now, border jumping and border crossing is something that's been in the news and has been in politics for as long as I can remember. It seems that for the last 34 years, one of the biggest topics to talk about in politics has been what to do about illegal immigration and how it's affecting our economy. One of the biggest surprises that's been out there is the fact that the political left, I don't want to call them liberals and I really don't want to call them Democrats because of the way that I grew up, but the political left has completely shifted their stance on what illegal immigration means and what to do about it. When I was younger and Bill Clinton was in office, he was most notable for saying that illegal immigration needed to be stopped, and it was one of the things that was ripping apart the economy. Hillary herself, during her 2008 campaign, talked about building and improving the fence that goes along our southern border, and again, throttling illegal immigration and taking care of the problem. George W. Bush was quite the opposite. In fact, he put an executive amnesty in place. His thought behind the amnesty for the illegals, which is an understandable strategy, being that if they are suddenly legal and have social security numbers, they can start being held accountable for taxes and bringing in tax revenue. And also serving in the military, George W. Bush was a wartime president. That is something that people need to keep in mind when they criticize him about his immigration policy. But during the Obama years, the political left did shift on their attitudes towards illegal immigration. Barack himself came out and talked about an executive amnesty plan in order to legalize all illegal immigrants at the time, but he was shot down in doing so. This was the start where the political left and the citizenry stopped saying illegal immigrants and started saying undocumented workers. In a sense, I do feel like this does suit more what the illegal immigrants were doing. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But it also changes the attitudes towards illegal immigration and really changes the mind of people on what to do about it. And of course, we're all familiar with the fact that our current sitting president, Donald J. Trump, has come out and said that he is going to build a great and glorious wall with the Mexican border and stop illegal immigration in its tracks completely. Now, illegal immigration has always been a big political topic for as long as we've been a country, and a lot of it stems from the same reason that we put a minimum wage in after the civil rights movement went in. Once slavery was ended and civil rights went into place, it was really easy for newly freed slaves to come out and say that they'll work for anything and undercut the jobs of several other citizens in order to get by. While I don't necessarily agree with the implementation and the practice, the idea behind the minimum wage was that you couldn't undercut somebody's wages. You had to pay everybody at least a minimum amount in order to get by. That way everybody had a shot at the workforce equally. It's turned into a massive argument and debacle around the country that generally doesn't need to be there, but that was what it was put into place for. But the difference between the newly freed slaves and the illegal immigrants that are coming in is the fact that the illegal immigrants do not need to abide by our U.S. laws, and they still will come out and work for anything, under the table cash, of course, in order to get by. And this does undercut a lot of American jobs, and this can be some good and some bad. There are people that do argue that the fact that illegal immigration is coming in and undercutting these jobs keeps the costs of some of these jobs and services low, making it easier for business people and higher paid CEOs to come around and focus more of their money on their more productive workers. I can see the merit in this argument, and I'm not going to lie about that. But in essence, it also is really unfair to the illegal immigrants or undocumented workers as well. A lot of them come in and they work their asses off, and they're either struggling to get by or not getting by. And I don't think that's right for people that are in our country. This is the land of opportunity, after all. I was listening to Ben Shapiro's show on Tuesday, and he brought up a very good point. The majority of illegal immigrants, his statistic was 2/3 of them, are people that did come over here legally, immigrated on a work visa or a student visa, and just overstayed their visa. Because of this, the wall, the great and glorious wall on our southern border, is actually more of a symbolic move than an actual deterrent in order to prevent illegal immigration. I do like the symbolism of the wall because it symbolizes that the laws that are on the books are now going to be enforced in this country. Past administrations have urged the officials that are in charge of immigration at times to just look the other way. In fact, the DACA program was a documented legal program in order to essentially look the other way on a lot of the people that are here. It's with this in mind that I'm going to surprisingly find myself agreeing with Ben Shapiro once again. One of the best ideas in order to deter and take care of the problem of illegal immigration is to open up a system where everybody can and needs to come forward and hire a larger series of federal judges. These judges will take all illegal immigration, at current figured statistics about 11 million people, and take them on a case-by-case basis and see how they are contributing to our economy as it is, decide whether or not we want to keep them in our country and give them a social security or immigrant ID number, or deport them back to their original or another country. But the big story that's out there on immigration this week is not the fact that we have illegal immigration or the fact that DACA is ending and millions of people are now illegal again. The real story that's going along with the immigration this week is the fact that Donald Trump is enforcing a law that's been on the books for much longer than he's been in office, which states that anybody that is caught at the border has to be separated from their minor children because you can't put a minor child into jail. The laws that are on the books currently say that if you are caught between one of the checkpoints trying to sneak into the country, you get arrested and your case has to go before a federal judge in order to decide whether you are approved for asylum or whether you are to be turned away and turned back into Mexico or whichever country it is that you are coming from. But the laws that are on the books also say that minor children cannot be held in a holding cell with adults. And honestly, I agree with that entirely. Holding cells are kind of unsanitary and they're not good for minor children. But the argument that's coming through the news is that Donald Trump, enforcing the law, is separating children from their families, which is causing them worse harm, and that's something that I don't necessarily agree with. I do agree with the fact that holding them in some of the conditions that have been displayed on the news is wrong, and there are better things that we can do about this. But I don't think the answer is to put a child in jail with his parents while the parent awaits trial. Now, there are a lot of citations of laws out there that are saying that this is a required practice. And personally, I don't know if that's a law or not. I have seen a lot of arguments on both sides saying whether or not it's a law. But I really think it's common sense, to be honest. Are you really going to try and tell me that you want to have a bunch of potential student visas or worker visas out there that come to this country as kids and the first thing that they see because of the irresponsibility of their parents is the inside of a jail cell. I don't think so. I don't think that the cages are the right answer either. Even though I haven't found any specific laws saying that there needs to be a separation of children from their parents, I have found laws that are saying that the first thing that you need to do if a child has to be separated from his parents at the border because of a border dispute is that you need to find a relative, legal or otherwise, of either the parents or the child for the child to stay with while the decision is being made about the parent or guardian of the child. A lot of people are also out there trying to say that the laws that are concerning separation of children from their parents at the border comes from a 1997 piece of legislation that was passed by Bill Clinton. I have yet to be able to find this legislation. The closest thing that I did find was a 2002 legislation where somebody claimed was passed by Democrats. Unfortunately, in 2002, Congress was Republican controlled in the House and had a one-seat majority in Senate, and the law would have had to been signed by Republican George W. Bush. If somebody that's out there watching this can find me a true citation of the 1997 law that is requiring this practice, I would love to read it and analyze it, and I would take some time and analyze it on my show, on a Thursday show. But the question comes out as to what to do with the unaccompanied minors if there is no close family member for them to go to. Now, in a lot of states that are on the border, there's a foster care system, and the children, while taken from their parents, do get to be placed into a home, maybe not a loving home, maybe not a familial home, but a home where they will be fed and cared for, and because of the foster system is also monitored by the federal government, to whatever extent is required by the states. I know there are a lot of criticisms of the foster system as of current, and the child can have a home to live in while the decision is made about his or her parents. In other states, there are buildings that look like schools with superheroes on the walls and an educational system and just generally look like, as I mentioned, a school or possibly a day camp where the kids can stay. It's more like a boarding school than anything, and they're well taken care of. Again, it's by the state, but it's not cages and filthy situations like what we're seeing on the news. From what I found while I've been researching this topic, the cages that we see on the news where people are separating children from their families is a very isolated incident. It seems to be only happening in a few little border towns in Texas and possibly in New Mexico. Now, I say that this is isolated, but that doesn't mean that it's right, and I'll come out and say that. You can't really put kids in cages. I know it's a temporary measure, but there's a better way to do it. And because this is a federal issue, the federal government can come down and put some pressure on the state of Texas to say, hey, you need to do a little bit better. After all, it is an enforcement of a federal law. There's one other option for this entire system that I'm a little surprised that none of the conservative punditry has brought up, because it was one of the first things that I thought of when I was researching this issue. During the Syrian migrant crisis, conservative pundits like Sean Hannity love to ask the question of celebrities in particular, or anybody else that had a large amount of money and a large house, how many immigrants they were housing in their homes when they were bringing them over. During this refugee situation, there was a lot of talk on the news about the refugees coming into this country and essentially living on the streets, and how we needed to come out and do better about that. And that is something that I do agree with on a certain level, especially with some of the voices that were the loudest in the situation, because they did have extra rooms and they could have housed many of the refugees that they were trying to put onto other neighborhoods where they would never be setting foot. Ironically, many of these voices are the same voices that are coming out and saying that the government needs to do better and the people need to do better about the immigrant child crisis and the children that are being held in squalid conditions. And in this case, it's not even just celebrities. I've known some foster parents growing up, and from what I understand, foster care has its ups and downs, but can be a very rewarding situation in which parents who have the time, means, and compassion to do so can help somebody in a temporary situation where his or her parents are not in the picture at the time. This would be a perfect opportunity for people to step up and enjoy the rewards of foster care. We may need to take some time and fly some kids around the country, or we may need to take some time and get some stipends to move some of these foster families towards the border, the people that are willing to move. But there's always the option, and I think there should be some room in the federal budget to help some of these foster parents and help people get into foster parenting in order to provide a better situation for these children than a boarding school-like environment or the cages that we see all over the news. And I'd love to see some more people step up. It is at this point another solution to add on to the list of things that we could do to help make this entire situation better, even if it is a temporary solution. And like the DACA situation that I talked about months ago, I think there is room in our federal budget in order to put more federal judges onto benches and help expedite some of these processes in order to get the immigration crisis, as it has become, under control, and get some of these cases heard quickly and get decisions made so that families can be reunited with their children rather than putting them into a situation where children, as I mentioned, will be winding up in jail cells. And lastly, to be completely honest, if as many of these people are asylum seekers as the news cycle tends to suggest, then I don't think a county or municipality jail cell is the best solution for what to do for them. It works well right now. If they're sneaking in between border stations, then they are breaking the law. But if they are truly seeking asylum because of political pressure or domestic abuse, as our asylum situation has been expanded to include, then it might be okay to put up a couple of facilities that may even be family friendly in order to house these immigrants. They would have to have at least a minimum level security, as a prison may, but because of the uniqueness of the situation surrounding it, I think it would be okay to put them in a better facility than just a county jail. I think that would be a fair compromise between putting them into prison and letting them roam the streets free and just hoping and praying that they come back for their immigration hearing. I would call that a compromise, but that would be something for local, state, and federal legislators to debate about and see what the best situation would be. What do you think about the immigration situation at hand? What do you think the best solution would be? And if asked, would you foster one of these children while his or her parents await their decision on asylum or deportation? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comments section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at edsblogtwitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And always remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care, everyone.